Agora, para mediar a primeira sessão plenária deste evento, convido ao palco a diretora-presidente do IDIS, Paula Fabiani.
Olá, olá a todos. Que delícia ver a casa cheia, tanta gente para falar desse tema tão maravilhoso que é a força das comunidades. Bom, eu dirijo o IDIS, o Instituto para o Desenvolvimento do Investimento Social, e estou muito feliz com esse momento e com todas as parcerias que a gente construiu no caminho. Eu queria, nós estamos aqui, primeira sessão, comunidades no mundo em transformação. Eu acho que nós estamos... As transformações são cada vez mais rápidas no mundo e também no nosso país e na América Latina. Nós temos aqui 3 gigantes, Eu vou ter que sentar ali do lado de 3 gigantes do mundo da filantropia, com experiências muito interessantes. Vou apresentar para vocês, a gente e chamar ao palco o Nick Deychakiwsky. Where are you, Nick? Eu espero ter falado certo. O Nick é da Fundação Mott, uma organização que existe desde 1935 e já investiu mais de 3 bilhões de dólares em 62 países. E tem um foco muito importante no desenvolvimento das comunidades e no apoio às fundações comunitárias. Queria chamar também ao palco Agustín Landa Garcia Teles. O Agustín tem a experiência de ter criado 2 fundações comunitárias no México. E vai contar para a gente também, do ponto de vista dos doadores, como é que funciona essa temática. E, por fim, queria chamar o nosso parceiro da United Way, parceiro muito importante para a realização desse evento e que está dando um toque muito latino-americano para este dia. O Brian Gallagher, que é presidente e CEO da United Way.
Hello? I'll start in Portuguese, and then we move to English, okay? Nós estamos aqui para falar sobre a força das comunidades. Como eu mencionei, eu estou aqui do lado de 3 gigantes, do tema, que tem muito a contar. E eu queria começar esse debate, A ideia é realmente a gente fazer uma conversa e vamos ter aí uma fala dos 3 e depois vamos abrir para perguntas de vocês, do público. E eu queria começar com o Nick. Nick, o Nick tem uma visão internacional do tema das fundações comunitárias e do desenvolvimento comunitário e também da filantropia comunitária, que é essa participação da comunidade na solução dos seus próprios problemas e no desenvolvimento de mecanismos de sustentabilidade para essas ações. Nick, the floor is yours.
Okay. Muito obrigado. Bom dia. And that is about the extent of my Portuguese. I apologize. So I will start with saying, why does the Mott Foundation support the development of community foundations around the world? And simply put, it's in our institutional DNA. As one of America's large private foundations, we have a strong presence both nationally in our country and internationally. Yet, the Mott Foundation remains deeply committed to its local roots, typically devoting 1/3 to half of our annual grant-making budget to our own home community of Flint, Michigan. In a quote that appears in all of our annual reports, our founder talks about the relationship between individuals and their community and the importance of institutions to facilitate that relationship. And community foundations are just such institutions. They identify, pool, and deploy a community's assets, harnessing local resources for local needs. They offer people the opportunity to express their charitable impulse and then channel that for the good of the community. And at their best, they foster local level accountability, responsibility, and leadership. Community foundations also can build bridges between residents that have financial resources and those that have other resources, such as time and knowledge. They can provide residents with the opportunities to engage and participate in improving their communities. And they do this with a long-term view, looking beyond just immediate needs. Why is this important, especially now? I think it's because people want voice. And although people increasingly can be heard in a world where technology makes participation easier, at the same time, there's a sense that large institutions are increasingly unresponsive and that people actually have less of a say. So a local level institution that is intrinsically of the people, for the people, by the people, and has some resources available to accomplish something, that can amplify people's voice, regain trust, and bring people of different financial means and backgrounds together in common cause. And it makes sense to start where people live, to regain trust in institutions, to strengthen civil society, and to achieve better development outcomes. And that is why the Mott Foundation supports community foundations. Now let me clarify a few concepts as we understand them at the Mott Foundation. Civil society, the construct whereby people can freely associate, speak, assemble, and participate in decision-making that affects their lives. We have a civil society program whose mission is to foster engaged, empowered, and equitable communities around the globe. Philanthropy. Yes, we all know it means the love of humankind, but to us it's also a part of civil society, and we define it as private investment for the public good. Community philanthropy. To us, it simply means local resources for local needs. And notice the word local, which implies a specific geography. Of course, we know and understand that there are different types of community which overlap and intertwine. That's why I actually love it's illustrated in your image of this kind of weaving and intertwining. And there are communities based on identity, on issue, on practice, and of course on place. Pretty much everyone belongs to several communities, and we know that there are communities within communities, yes. However, we at Mott focus on place, and it's not only because of the institutional legacy of ours that I described earlier, but because people physically have to coexist in a community of place. They have to share certain things such as roads, schools, police protection, etc. And due to their proximity, they also have the chance to meet live and in person. Community philanthropy is often described as a practice that's based on certain principles and values, such as reciprocity, solidarity, obligation, self-reliance, interdependence, trust. It can be completely informal, or it can take many different institutional forms. For example, United Ways, giving circles, community development organizations, volunteer centers, community foundations. And all of these forms are valuable. Repeat that, all of these forms are valuable. However, the form that our foundation has chosen to focus on mainly is the community foundation, whether you call it that or not. I'll just quickly run through the main characteristics of community foundations, again, as we see them at the Mott Foundation. Firstly, they are institutions, that is, they are legally constituted organizations with a capacity to manage resources. Secondly, they are locally established and governed. Third, they are philanthropic, That is, they secure, build, manage, and deploy resources and distribute resources, whether they're financial or other. Fifth, they are permanent with long-term goals and a strategy for sustainability. Sixth, they are independent of any corporation or individual or family, religious institution, or government for that matter. And seventh, they are inclusive. That is, they are investing in a range of issues and aims as defined by the community, and they involve a broad array of residents in creating and implementing a local development agenda. In our view, one of their key functions is to empower others in the community, primarily through grant making to community-based organizations, rather than taking on everything themselves. But they also do this by playing a leadership role, by gathering and deepening a community's knowledge of itself, and by facilitating dialogue between various people, organizations, and interests, so that better ways are found to improve residents' lives. If you allow me to make a practical case for a community foundation based on Flint, Michigan, again, our hometown. For those of you who have not heard of Flint, it's the birthplace of General Motors, and in its heyday, it had thousands of manufacturing jobs and a high quality of living until the 1970s, when the US car manufacturers started facing fierce international competition. So over the decades, Flint has been declining. At its peak, it was a city of around 200,000 residents. Now it is only half of that. Now, when it comes to local philanthropy, the big kid on the block is the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. As you mentioned, about $3 billion in assets and an annual grant-making budget of about $120 million. About half of that last year, $60 million, went to our local community. Now, in comparison, there's a community foundation in Flint, which actually our chairman helped get started in 1988. And it currently has assets of around $180 million, and its annual grant making last year was $8 million. So, we, the Mott Foundation, are headquartered in Flint. Why should we bother with a community foundation, which is literally right across the street from our building? So there are three main reasons I'd like to point out. The first is legitimacy. No matter what, the community foundation is owned, not in a legal sense, but in a conceptual sense, by the community. And because of this, it speaks with a voice that is more representative and reflective of the community. It can engage and convene and involve people in a way that no private or family or corporate foundation can. The second is leverage. I don't know how it is here, but in my country, rarely do individuals, families, foundations, or corporations, or governments even want to give money to a private foundation. But they will readily give to a community foundation. And that the community foundation can more easily pool funds and deploy them. And then a third point is agility. Certainly in Flint, our community foundation can more easily give small grants or run programs or put on events much more nimbly than can the Mott Foundation, which has 80 employees and a certain level of bureaucracy. But even a very large community foundation, I'll use Chicago as an example, that's not far away from us, and it's even slightly bigger assets-wise than our foundation. They can do things much more quickly and effectively in Chicago than, say, we can, because they are, so to speak, closer to the ground. They are, once again, they belong to the community. And one last point, coming back to Flint, is that I've spoken about community foundations, but there's a fabulous United Way affiliate in Flint. You may or may not have heard of Flint's water crisis. 4 years ago, there were high levels of lead found in not only the water, but in the blood of the city's children. And in response to this crisis, our United Way and our community foundation really worked together closely, hand in glove, to address this crisis. Both received support from not only the Mott Foundation, but thousands of donors. and both operated programs and provided grants that were beyond the capacity of the Mott Foundation to do so. Would that every community have such good partnership and community philanthropy infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for pointing out the importance of hearing the voices of the communities. They are the voices of our society. And with that, I would like to pass to Agustín. Agustín has a very good vision of the Latin America panorama of community philanthropy and can share with us the experience of creating and strengthening community foundations in Mexico.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to speak in English, and I am a Spanish speaker, but I think it's easier to speak English for everyone right now. They asked me to talk about a little bit of what is the situation in the Latin American countries, which I really don't know completely. And of course, I'm going to give you some data that I bring down from the Community Foundations Atlas. And it gives you some numbers and some idea of where we are as Latin America. There are 1,874 base philanthropy organizations detailed in that atlas. Mostly of them are in United States, Europe, which didn't exist, many of them before the 1990s. Many of them were created in the 1990s after the fall of the wall. And 66% of all the foundations, community foundations in the world has been created in the last 25 years. So this is incredible because what we have seen is that for me, community philanthropy allows us to take control of our own community. As Nick says, it allows us to be in our community, who we are, where do we want to go, and to serve our own needs. In Latin America, there are only 46 community foundations, or type of community foundation based, local philanthropy organizations, community philanthropy-based organizations. We are learning from what is in Brazil. There are 5. We yesterday were talking to Taboa, for example, which is not in the map yet in Serra Grande, but it's clearly looking towards that becoming a community foundation. In Mexico, we have 28 local-based philanthropy organizations, which 14 of them are part of the Alliance of Community Foundations of Mexico, or Comunalia, which I have the honor right now to be the chair of the board. I have to tell you that I come from, my origin in the nonprofit sector is in the grassroots movement, in the grassroots. I started working with an organization for street children in the 80s. It was the mode on that time. What is happening with this lost decade of children in the 80s, and I was working there. I was 24 years old at that time. And I noticed in this time that there was not a systemized sector. That in Mexico, and I think most of Latin America and maybe Asia at the same time, we're very shallow. We're very, very shallow, focusing most of the time on assistential or service, direct service to our community. And I applaud, and I'm happy what Marcus said, that we have to get knowledge. We don't have enough knowledge about our own communities. We invest a lot on our countries on maybe technical or engineering research or things like that, but we invest very little on social research, on where we are, how we can change, how can we do things. We lack, the other thing that I saw is that we lack of a long-term view of who we want to be as a community. And that jeopardizes our future because we haven't decided who we really want to be. And in bringing the different voices of the community, not some of them. Looking into what the United States have done, and most of us looking there because there is the most advanced philanthropic sector in the world, we looked at they really understand how to serve the donor. And we have great programs on fundraising and how to serve the donor, how to bring them, unleash the programs. But my point of view, sometimes we serve so much donor that we are detached from the needs of the community. So it's also a need to be that bridge that Nick said in his remarks. When we, in 1998, started understanding about the concept of community foundations, I jumped right away to it, like Nick said. And I wonder if you wouldn't jump into a concept that gives the opportunity to your community to control the destiny in some way in the future of your own community and unleash, and I think this is very important, unleash the incredible amount of resources that we see or that we have in our community that we sometimes come back mostly from an insufficiency than a sufficiency approach. And I think we have huge amount of resources on our communities that, yes, we are maybe poor and maybe we don't have all those amounts there, but we can do it. And I want to talk a little bit of this very fast. For me, creating a community foundation was like creating the Grameen Bank in some way. The Yunus approach to the ladies in Bangladesh was, you are poor, but you are not so poor that you cannot save 1 cent at least. And if you keep saving that cent, you will have enough resources to create your business. But at the same time, if you put that cent with the cent of the other female, the neighbor, and the other neighbor, then you have 3 cents or more cents, and then you can do something together. And this is the same thing in the community foundation world or in the community philanthropy world, is that we may have small resources, but when we bring them together, we pull them, we can do a lot more, and we can create synergy. And that is what here, I think, is right now the opportunity. We have huge inequalities. There are a lot of resources in some purses, but there are other resources also in the community that are locked because we don't want to see farther away from them, that we can do a lot more with that. So looking into this, coming from the grassroots sector, we went up the stream and we went to the donor sector. And we create 2 community foundations without being rich. I work for a university. I don't have my inheritance back there. I do this, by the way, I do it as a volunteer. This is not my full-time job. I work for the university in fundraising. And it's possible. And we have created 2 community foundations, and now I am chairing the Council of Community Foundations, or the Alliance of Community Foundations in Mexico. So it's possible. It's really possible, but we have to be, I think, very open to all the different approaches that exist and not exclude any of them, but include all of them in how that we can work together and what are the values of each one and where is that we can, with each of them, attack or touch the niche that nobody's touching. So I will stop here, and I don't know if that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Agustín. I think that very good points on how we really should focus on the communities and on the donors and to learn from our communities. With that, I would like to pass to Brian. Brian and United Way. United Way is an organization that has an incredible experience mobilizing volunteers and donors for giving into communities and giving into social projects and social transformation. And I think it would be incredible to learn from the experience of United Way with the communities, and also the potential to create positive impact by working for communities around the world.
Thanks, Paula. Let me start by saying, if the world could start every day with that quintet of young people that played music for us this morning, the world would be a better place, wouldn't it? That was well done. Well done. Let me do it this way. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. The first point I want to make is United Way is large because we act small. We're $4.8 billion US in annual revenue, but we're in 1,800 local United Ways in 41 countries around the world. Each one is an independent organization that shares the name and the learning from being part of a network. We have relationships with 65,000 corporations worldwide. We have 8 million donors and 2.5 million volunteers. We are volunteer governed. I work for a board of volunteers. My boss is a volunteer. We haven't said that yet, but I think if you're going to be of community, then your governance has to be of community. And that's what it is, both a challenge sometimes to work for your boss who's a volunteer, but it keeps you in community because that person is in the community. There are things happening in the world today that I think in order to get inside this conversation, you have to internalize. United Way, we're talking about age. We're 132 years old. And as you get older, hopefully you become more wise, but you also become more fragile and more risk averse. And so the question is, how do you re-energize yourself? I think you go back and you look at your history. United Way was driven to its genesis in the United States because of the migration of people. The industrialization of the economy in the United States drove people from rural communities into cities for manufacturing jobs. And there was no NGO system, there was no safety net from the government, and so voluntary organizations formed to provide support to these mass numbers of people coming into the cities. I say that to say, in our world, there are 4 things that I think are driving the disruption in the world, and the world is disrupted. The first one is the globalization of the economy. The fact is that we have created a global marketplace. And a global marketplace does many things, but one of the things it does is it drives migration. It should not be a surprise to business leaders or government leaders that drove the globalization of the economy that labor moves to find opportunity. And labor, when your national economy changes, you move within national bounds. When it's a global economy, you move beyond those bounds. And the same reason that we had to start United Way is now creating social disruption and challenges in communities all over the world. So it's globalization, migration, more people living outside their country of birth today than any time in the history of the world. And it's not just in Latin America, and it's not just Guatemala and Honduras going to Mexico, Mexico going to the United States. It's Southeast Asians going to Japan and Korea. It's Middle East and Africa going to Europe. The migration is everywhere in the world. The biggest social issue in China is the migration of people. Third is demographic change. In the United States, 40% of the workforce today are millennials. If it doesn't happen on their phone, it didn't happen. And so we need to understand that. The fourth is digital technology. Which leads me to the second big thought in terms of community and institutions. For my whole career, and for most of those of us in developed economies, institutions government, religious organizations, social organizations, whether they're United Way or community foundations, they drove change. They dictated to the population what they needed to know because they had more information than the population. Because of the changes in the world, we as individuals have the same access to information that institutions have. Therefore, individuals are demanding from institutions that they react to them versus the opposite. It's a very, very important, I'll just say from United Way, important concept to internalize. It means that we've had to move from being ourselves as an intermediary, taking resources, pooling it, having volunteers decide what are the most important issues and investing it, to starting to now build a platform that allows individuals to come on the platform and interact with the players in community. Instead of we having all the knowledge, help individuals help us decide what to do about education, about migration, about housing. It's reacting to individuals and institutions changing to them versus institutions dictating to individuals. There are 5 strategic initiatives for us, therefore. We believe in market-driven impact. Research can only take you so far. If the market won't support it, then you're not going to be able to scale it. Second is everything we do is focused on the individual. How do we create individual experiences that bring people into community problem solving and solutions? Which means 65,000 corporate relationships we have to be much more about shared purpose, more strategic, helping their employees act in community, not helping the company. The company helping their employees is good for the company. We helping the employees, therefore, is a shared purpose. And increasingly act as a single network. The one I left out before I finish is we have a $10 million roundtable, individuals giving $10 million or more to their United Way. The reason we did that is globalization and transformation of the economy concentrates wealth. The amount of wealth that's been created in the global economy is immense. And being able to take some of that and redistribute that wealth through community foundations, through local NGOs, through taxes, is really, really important. The other thing that globalization and transformation does is create inequality. And markets don't necessarily close the inequality and the equality gaps. That's part of government and NGOs. So we have tried to move from seeing ourselves as an institution to seeing ourselves as a community platform that allows, whether it's in India, in New York City, in Bogota, that the individuals interact with the community players to help understand what the needs are in order to help solve the problems. Last thing I'll say. Technology has created the ability to transact at almost zero cost. So I can give to anything I want to give to in the world. I can give to a water relief effort in India and give the money to a particular one farmer and probably watch the farmer drill the well and wave to me as that's happening. The question is, how do you take the individuals combined with community knowledge to create a new way to scale solutions? So how do you take that one farmer and turn that farmer into 100,000 farmers and therefore affect water?
Thank you, Brian. As I said, I have 3 giants here with me on stage. So new problems. Maybe new problems will strengthen us and our institutions. And the role of technology in this world in transformation, I think there are lots of opportunities, but also new problems coming from technology, migration and other aspects. And I could not let out the environment, especially being a Brazilian, and how we can strengthen the role of communities
in taking care of our environment. And I would just finish, how can we really create ways to redistribute wealth? That's a big challenge of our century, I think. There is a lot of wealth, but increasing inequalities. How can we change this path, invert this path? I think the power of communities is part of the solution. And with that, I would like to open to questions. The audience is very quiet, so... Alguém tem alguma pergunta? And yes, maybe you could use your headphones now. E a pergunta pode ser em português. Alguma pergunta? Se vocês não vão começar, começo eu. So I'll start. Vou perguntar em português. Bom, uma das questões importantes dessa discussão, né, e foram tocadas aí pelos nossos 3 palestrantes, é como assegurar que, nesses processos, na institucionalização, no caso de fundações comunitárias, ou mesmo no modelo de atuação da United Way, como é que a gente assegura que está ouvindo as vozes da comunidade, né? Nós temos hoje tantos tipos de comunidades, são comunidades por afinidades, comunidades por temas e comunidades territoriais. Como é que a gente consegue garantir que a gente cria mecanismos? Acho que tecnologia é um mecanismo, mas existem outras maneiras, né? E é muito importante nesse processo. E vou cutucar aí nosso público para ir pensando em perguntas. Podem ir levantando a mão, que eles levam o microfone para vocês. Who wants to start?
I'll grab that quickly. See, one of the ways, and I wanted to react to something that you said before, is that, you know, we need to not only listen to the donors, but listen to the communities. And I think, in some sense, we are setting up a false divide, okay? And I don't mean the institutions necessarily, but us. And what I think we have to recall for everybody and work toward is to remember that the donors are part of the community. I've seen it many places. I visited several projects here in Brazil, even yesterday, where I'll probably slaughter the pronunciation, Larda Bensal Divina, where the donors were taking us around and showing us, and you could tell that these donors were part of the community. It wasn't this divide of either you are some wealthy person giving a bunch of money, and then there is the community, right?
That's maybe part of the solution of reducing inequality.
To be seeing the relationships that we are all in this together. And that's why whatever mechanisms means there are institutions or others to build those, make sure that there are bridges among and for people to see their commonness, their common purpose. That is what's going to be helpful here.
I agree with that point, that donors are of community, but I would say this, that in the United States, for instance, the most developed philanthropic market in the world, there's more money being given to charity every year, but fewer people giving to charity. And that's a bad trend. So people are feeling disconnected from their communities, feeling disconnected to the institutions of charity, and I think personally that innovation and how we connect people to the work is going to happen more and more locally. That mayors are figuring it out faster than state governors and federal leaders. And, the really smart mayors around the world use digital technology and have ways for their citizens to with keypads on their thumbs, communicate with the mayor and city officials, and then they take that data and they put it into a public decision-making process. So it's the use of digital technology. The other, in terms of redistribution of wealth, is that tax policy matters. And we as nonprofit leaders have to be willing to take positions on tax policy. I'll just say again, in the United States, even though we've been very focused around the world on this, the latest tax legislation in the United States was the worst piece of public policy legislation I've seen in almost 20 years in Washington. it exasperated inequality in the United States, and it didn't drive sustained economic expansion. We have to be willing, and we opposed it, which we never do. We never take positions on things like that. But tax policy matters in terms of distribution of wealth, where development goes in communities, how we use digital technology to access public officials. We as a United Way would never be involved in environmental issues. But now our marketplace is telling us that they care about environmental issues, and we're now figuring out what is our role in helping respond to both the market and the need in terms of the environment.
That's a good provocation, Tex. Anyway, questions? Perguntas? Temos uma pergunta ali.
Bom dia. Obrigada pela exposição de vocês. Meu nome é Daniele Fabiani. Eu fiquei aqui pensando, como entusiasta da ideia de fundações comunitárias, como é que isso poderia se expandir, e imaginando que isso é uma oportunidade para tanto famílias quanto empresas, como estratégia de atuação nos seus territórios, né? Mas também, imaginando um diálogo já com elas, imaginei que a gente vai encontrar certas barreiras que têm a ver com o envolvimento com a política local. Eu fico pensando que, quando você vai para a rua e você cria esse locus de encontro da comunidade e começa a levantar necessidades e oportunidades, obviamente, toda a dinâmica de poder local começa a se revelar ali. E talvez isso seja um receio para as empresas e para famílias de repente, se ver por trás e envolvida nessa dinâmica. Então, eu queria saber da experiência de vocês, como que vocês responderiam a esse receio, a essa barreira, como que vocês têm lidado com isso, que provavelmente emerge quando você se coloca como um articulador de uma fundação comunitária num território. Obrigada.
Mais alguma pergunta? Vou coletar todas as perguntas e aí a gente faz uma resposta conjunta por causa do tempo. Mais uma pergunta ali no fundo.
Bom dia, eu sou Márcia. A minha pergunta tem a ver com confiança. A gente tem estudos aqui no Brasil, que é o Trust Barometer, da Eldman, que fala que, nos últimos anos, a confiança está sendo abalada, e no ambiente que a gente vê de polarização, isso não ajuda, né? As pessoas estão muito desconfiadas. Aqui no Brasil, como vocês... Não sei se vocês, nos últimos dias que estiveram aqui, tiveram a oportunidade de sentir um pouco o clima, mas a gente tem um governo que não acredita nas organizações, muito pelo contrário, tem falado muito mal, enfim, o que não contribui para o ambiente. E a gente sabe que a doação ela depende desse processo de confiança. Então, eu queria, com base na experiência de vocês, o que vocês poderiam compartilhar com a gente para inspirar modelos. Enfim, ontem mesmo, na fundação que eu atuo, a gente estava conversando com um projeto social numa das estados mais pobres do Brasil, e que, em circunstâncias ainda mais precárias, o individualismo prevalece, né? Um sistema de autoproteção, vamos assim dizer, como foi colocado pelo líder da organização. Então, qualquer contribuição que vocês puderem dar, acho que ajuda a gente a navegar nesses tempos difíceis.
Obrigada, Márcia. E uma última pergunta ali. Isso, acho que é aí.
Não vou poder contestar.
Bom dia, meu nome é Luciana, do Estou Refugiado. Falando um pouquinho sobre confiança e sobre tecnologia, eu queria saber de vocês a questão do blockchain. Se o blockchain, investindo em plataformas onde a gente tem aquela questão, né, da transparência, né, onde a gente poderia ligar, né, o receptor, a pessoa que receberia a doação do investidor diretamente, de uma forma onde você tem um contrato, né, que transpassa, né, de uma outra forma, se vocês estão investindo, se isso está crescendo na fundação de vocês.
Acho que tem mais uma pergunta aqui. E outra aqui? 5 perguntas? 5 questions, ok?
Bom dia, eu sou Mônica, da Fundação Roberto Marinho. Eu gostaria de ouvi-los, especialmente o colega do México, para conversar com a gente sobre atuação em territórios conflagrados. Eu vivo numa cidade onde a gente tem, historicamente, a ocupação das comunidades pelas milícias, pelo crime, pela polícia corrompida, por igrejas evangélicas que nem sempre têm, de fato, um compromisso com a melhoria da qualidade de vida das pessoas. E somos parceiros de várias ONGs que atuam nos territórios, e a gente vive momentos muito complicados, dialogando aqui com o que a colega colocou anteriormente, onde o poder público, muitas vezes, desacredita a própria atuação dessas ONGs que, legitimamente, atuam nos territórios há muito tempo. Então, gostaria de ouvi-los sobre como lidar num contexto social, político tão complicado quanto o que a gente está vivendo em algumas comunidades, como no Rio de Janeiro.
Ok, e agora a última pergunta.
Hi, I'm Nilanj Desai with the Aspen Institute's Global Opportunity Youth Initiative. And one thing that we've been working on in several areas around the world, and a few pilots we've done, is the idea of collective impact and the way that donors and funders and NGOs can work more closely together, collaboratively, on finding problems and solutions. To point that Nick made before about the donor divide and the fact that people aren't seen as part of community. So I wanted to ask you, what is the scope potentially in Brazil for further donor collaboration and possibly to start helping NGOs avoid what is something fairly ubiquitous, the competition that they often have amongst themselves for donor funding?
Okay, so just summarizing 5 aspects, and maybe you could choose which one you would like to respond. I think Agustín has a specific question, but it's the political environment and how this can really make donors cautious, I would say. The transparency issue, trust, confidence, and the question about violence and the lack of security, how to deal with this issue. I mean, this is probably for you.
Yes.
And the last one, collaboration.
Okay, too many questions to summarize. Okay, the first, I think...
Just choose one or two.
Yeah, but, okay. The first one, can you repeat me what was the first one? I think that was local, no.
Maybe you could start with the violence and the specific question that was directed to you.
All right, the first one of the violence. Yes, Monterrey was a very violent city in 2011. And the community, I can say that in some way, crises show up when we need to change. I need change that we have lost our own community. Monterrey was a very tight community, very proud, and it showed that we lost it. We grew in Monterrey, the nonprofit sector, almost 30% in the last 6 years, because the community wanted to have a response to the needs of that violence. Yes, the government sector specifically doesn't like the NGOs because the citizen has a voice now to tell what should happen in the community. And it will continue. It was like their own land to do things. The citizen didn't participate. What we have done is, through the Community Foundation Monterrey, start to create a platform so more nonprofits can grow and spur and starting to happen in Monterrey that will affect or will change those issues of the community. It's not a short-term response. We know that it's for the long term, and we have to focus on that. In the meantime, yes, the private sector has partnered to enforce the government, to invest in security, and the private sector has invested their own resources on creating a new police on the state, for example. We, the government, but it was funded by the private sector, not by the government. They didn't have the resources. In some of the cases, the community foundation served as a platform to set the money there in order to make this happen. With these alliances between government and the private sector. The private sector, as I imagine happens here too, has no trust on what the government is going to do once you give the money to them. So we use the community foundation as a way to put that money and to work. So the community foundation was that bridge between the government and the private sector doing it. At the same time, it was bringing in the nonprofits in the area to talk about the issues that were there. We have other crises. In 2010, we have a huge hurricane hitting 500 miles inside the country and devastated the city, really devastated the city. Our main roads were almost totally crippled inside the city. And a group of corporations created Sumarse, the red of social corporate responsibility in Monterrey. The community foundation was the one chosen to manage the resources of that group. That it was it's a formal group, but they don't have a legal entity to manage the resources. So the community foundation was the platform to do that. And we have been helping on that way. So what I want to say in this is, if we can create platforms, as Brian said, platforms that the community can use to implement the changes of the community that they want, that we want, it makes it a lot more possible to happen than just being reactive to it. So if we can create our own infrastructure, our own social infrastructure, as platforms for the community to use them, we can really make and attain these things, these issues that we have in our community.
So I think this answer touches on many aspects: the political environment, creating trust, collaboration. That I think. Thank you very much, Agustín. We actually run out of time, so I'll ask you to be brief and also make your final comments about the session and about the topic.
Okay, thank you, Paula. I'll try to wrap in an answer into final comments. Danielle, I believe it was, just so you know, we have started partnering with IDIS on developing programming to help support the development of community foundations in Brazil. We're actually doing that in certain other parts of the world. So stay tuned on that front. Regarding the question of the fear of working with government, it depends on the situations. We worked with the Charities Aid Foundation in Russia for many years to develop community foundations there. And despite that country becoming more and more autocratic, there are now some 70 community foundations in Russia, and they started around 2000 developing them. There, they said there's no way to have a community foundation without actually having a local government official on the board of the community foundation. I, as an American, said, how can you do that? And I know in Mexico they never have local government officials. But for Russia, that's what they had to do. So I think that's something that each community or each country has to decide on their own. Regarding collaborative efforts, precisely, I tend to want to think, let's do that on the local level. You know, sometimes foundations, just even ours, has a broader spectrum of ambitions. We run international programs, we run national programs. And yet we also do things in our local community with other partners. And we try to do that together and bring in the community's voice. So this is something that you know, a community foundation can model collaboration very well. And one last point is, as a donor, you don't have to, as we know from financial theory, we don't put all our investments into one thing. You know, you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. You can support a community foundation, have a donor-advised fund there. You can support the United Way. You can create even your own foundation as well. You diversify your philanthropic investments just like you would your market investments too, and that's a healthy way to go.
So you have to answer the blockchain thing.
Charities Aid Foundation, but
Brian.
So I would first let me talk about trust. In NGOs, unlike commercial enterprises, there is no rational capital market. Money follows bad ideas all the time. All the time. There's no real profit motive. You don't drive bad actors out. Our currency is trust. You lose it, and it takes a long time to build it back. And here's what I would say to my NGO colleagues. Start with yourself. We have to show complete transparency in our operation, the ability to look inside our organizations. And many of us don't do that. We have sensitive information, salaries and compensation, contracts. We don't want to show it. You have to show it all, or you can't demand it of others. That to me is just the bottom. That's the foundation. Second then is results. Can you show that you're getting results for the investment? The third and the holy grail of trust is engagement. You get people involved in your effort and not just do it for them, but actually engage them. You see it with your own volunteers. The question then becomes, how do you get more and more people? How do you deal with violence in neighborhoods? Our affiliates deal in violent areas all the time. Our affiliate from Venezuela is here right now. The question, people live in those neighborhoods. You have to engage the people in those neighborhoods, the NGOs in those neighborhoods. I'll say this about blockchain and technology. We're a very large organization, and we made the decision that we are not in the technology business. Therefore, we need a partner in technology. And so we did an agreement with Salesforce to build an open platform for us that would not just allow donors on the platform, but NGOs and other collaborative projects. This idea of being able to connect a donor to a recipient is interesting, but not going to change the world. Connecting donors through blockchain technology and other ways to create social capital of common good that rebuilds communities, not just gets money to somebody in need, that will change the world. That will change the lives of more individuals. We are chasing the wrong prize. The prize in use of technology is to create what we've been describing, United Way, community foundations. That's a century old. The question is, how do you create the concept, the value of these things in today's technology? Blockchain is a secure, transparent way to do that. But what I would encourage all of us in the room to internalize, we're not a technology company. Go find a partner to help build the technology that's open platform that actually drives transparency. And what it's done for us, I'll just say, it's made us very, very uncomfortable. Because we now are open. And it's not just about getting a donor's money to a particular project, but allowing the donor to help affect how we operate our organization. You get to that point, and now the power is in the people. Then you can talk to government, then you can talk to your companies, and the technology allows you to do that at scale.
So I would close with that reflection on how trust, transparency will increase solidarity in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.